We want to show people all the talent in this city.
That's my dog Bruno.
What is up, party people? Back with the Party Quest crew. And, young lady, please introduce yourselves to the people at home.
Hello, my name is Kenna Burima.
And I understand you're going to be the feature at this month's Elevated Etiquette.
I certainly am. It's a hip-hop open mic, I'm told, so I won't be doing any hip-hop necessarily, but I think diversity is good.
Oh, well said, madame. Diversity indeed. So what would your definition of urban art be?
Oh, that is a good question. At least how I understand it, and certainly I can only speak for the little that I know, it's incorporating the experiences of people living in urban centers. And so to me it would encompass any kind of activity that we do in the city, music, writing. I certainly feel that when I hear the word urban, I definitely think of street art and graffiti art. And when I think about urban music, certainly there's the idea of the genre that is more sort of beat focused, soul, Motown, hip hop, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of, as I understand it, what urban art would be to me.
Cool. Well, I think you're going to be a nice fit this Friday. Could you tell us the moment you realized you were a musician?
That's a good question. I guess if I look back on it, I've been a musician all my life, but when I think what happened is I quit my full-time job to pursue music full-time, and that only happened about 5 or 6 years ago. And I remember filling out an application for something, I think for car insurance, and I remember for the very first time I wrote down on the occupation line, musician. And that first time that I did that moment, I remember so clear. I'm like, oh, I'm a musician. And so probably filling out car insurance was when I realized yes, I was a musician.
And a fine musician you are. May I compliment you on the way you pulled together that beautiful event at the Arata Opera Center just recently.
Thank you. Well, thank you for being a part of it. That was a real thrill to see so many Calgary female musicians and singers on stage in one night, especially during the holiday season, to have everyone come together like that and see, the networking and so many women being like, oh, hey, I don't know who you are. I didn't know that you did this, and having these conversations happen, because I think so many times, particularly women in music, if we're in our little genres and our little communities, we can kind of feel alone. There's a couple girls in each genre, and so to actually come out of our pockets of those scenes and be like, oh, hey, there's someone else that's doing what I do differently, but to be able to feel like you're not alone, that's certainly what I got out of that event.
You know who my aha moment was?
Oh, do tell.
Eve Hell.
Yeah, I love
I
Eve.
had never seen her before, but I will never forget her now.
Yeah, she is fantastic. Yeah, she's an amazing musician. Yeah.
Cool. Well, nicely done. And what were you guys raising money for?
So definitely one of the biggest stories of 2014, 2015, I think, has been the rise of feminism, and as a part of conversations that I continued to have online and in real life in regards to the stories about Bill Cosby or Jean Ghomeshi, I felt that it was really important that we continue the dialogue, but also consider how young men can be a part of the positive change towards respecting all people regardless of gender. And the Calgary Sexual Health Center, they have a program called Wise Guys, which goes into junior high schools and works with young boys, talking about concepts of consent and rape culture. And so we raised up almost about $5,000 for them. So I really feel that program is important because it puts responsibility on creating positive spaces into the hands of boys, who are half of the equation when it comes to talking about those things that I just mentioned. So Wise Guys program is an important program, definitely.
Empowerment as opposed to shaming.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say that I think that's really important, and I think it's cool.
Awesome.
And just more power to you.
Thanks.
So how would you describe your genre of music?
Thank you for asking. Every time someone asks me that, I'm like, I'm going to make sure that I think of this the next time someone asks me. And Well, because of my background, because I'm a classical musician, I definitely would say that there's elements of that, but certainly someone described my music. It's sometimes easier to hear what other people call your music and then be like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, rather than trying to describe what you do in one sort of term. And definitely Cabaret has been used to describe my music. So taking elements of old American music, early jazz, definitely, sort of the darker qualities of rock and roll. I'm a huge fan of all sorts of genres and have studied all sorts of genres as a student. So that means that it all sort of just gets thrown into the pot. And the direction I'm taking now, lots of synths, definitely a little bit more complexity in terms of harmony and instrumentation. So Cabaret would be the best way to describe what I do. Yeah.
How do you feel about the movie Moulin Rouge?
I love the movie Moulin Rouge, and I have no problem admitting that. I'm not necessarily a musicals person necessarily, but I love the pageantry and the productions of musicals and the theatrics of musicals, and certainly Moulin Rouge. One of my favorite songs of all time is Nature Boy, and David Bowie sings a cover of that song in that movie. So there's something about that. Any inclusion of David Bowie in anything, I'm gonna be all for.
Good to know. So what can people expect from you this Friday at Elevated Etiquette?
Well, I've written a bunch of new songs, and so I'm going to be showcasing that. And I mean, generally, I play with a band. In its entirety, I sometimes play with 7 people, but I've toned everything down to a trio myself, singing on keys, and John May on drums, and Steve Fletcher on Moog and synth bass. But I've been working on a solo set, and that means that I have to reconfigure songs and think about how can I put on a show as a solo act. It's a different beast when you don't have all these instruments to hide behind. So I've been working on that. Got a couple jokes, but definitely these new songs that I've been writing are really. They're inspired by a lot of stuff that I've been hearing in the news. I drive a lot. I drive sort of not as a hobby, but you live in Calgary, you're going to be driving, and so I listen to the CBC News every half an hour, and a lot of times I have to turn it off. But I internalize and I become affected by what's going on in the world, and I think, how can I write a love song when all of these awful things are happening, and to process those things and the stories of people suffering severe hardship. The only thing that I know really what to do is to write a song about it, at least so I can process it myself. Because I certainly am in a position of privilege. I live in Calgary. I have a good job. I'm able to make ends meet, and so coming from that position, I'm always constantly aware of how I can either further a cause or contribute to creating positive change in my community, in my city, and being part of that dialogue. And the only way I feel that I can do that and still be completely authentic and honest with myself is through music. So that's there'll be some politics, not gonna lie, there'll be some politics on Friday, but I think certainly it's for me it's about social justice. The events in Ferguson really affected me and affected obviously millions of people around the world seeing what was going down there. So I have a song about that. I have a song about misogyny. It's endless, all the things that I can get angry about.
So as a powerful human, you feel a responsibility?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I feel that because I have generally lived an easy life, that it's important for me that just because I haven't experienced hardship, maybe I haven't experienced discrimination or prejudice, that doesn't mean that if those things haven't affected me directly, that I can't be a part of the solution. It's like the concept of, if we talk about yes, all women, and not all men, those are two different messages. To me, I really believe either you're a part of the solution or you're a part of the problem, and you can't just sit on the fence. Certainly now, you can't sit on the fence. And by sitting on the fence about issues about race, sexism, about ableism. If you're sitting on the fence about those things, you've already picked a side, and it's the side of the oppressor. And I have to walk that fine line of making sure, not only as a musician, but as a person, that I'm making sure that I'm walking the line of respect and shutting up and listening when it's appropriate, and definitely when it comes to talking about issues of racism and ableism and homophobia, that I am in a position where I need to listen. So as a musician, I try to balance those two things. Not listening, which is obviously being on stage and being the center of attention, but also being quiet and listening to what people have to say, because their stories are what comes into my music and definitely shows up in my lyrics.
So you're a storyteller.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I mean, certainly there was a time when I wasn't. Certainly I was much more abstract in my concepts and sort of, like in my last album, I have a song about alien love songs and talking about, things about me, my stories and my family and now I guess I'm just looking more outwards and feeling compelled to somehow make sense of everything that's going on, and certainly through social media and being so heavily mired and drawn into conversations that happen online. How do I make sense of that stuff is again, by telling stories.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I commend you, because it's very easy to point out problems, right?
Yeah.
And say what's wrong with the world, but to actually start brainstorming a few solutions and even taking some actions, I think that's special. So good for you.
Thank you. I mean, it's certainly, I think everyone has to make that decision as to how far they're willing to go. And I think that, I'm not the type of personality that goes out in the streets and protests. Maybe if the time came, I should and I would. I think about, there's just been lots of rallies and such that certainly I would like to be more a part of that activist community. And there is a strong community in Calgary, which is interesting. I think a lot of people think that Calgary is sort of this cowboy, oil and gas Wild West, and that there were just, a bunch of privileged rich people, but there's a strong community, certainly through CGSW, through the Arusha Center, through all sorts of little pockets. There's grassroots movements of people who are aware and wanting to stake their, maybe a better phrase would be to draw their line in the sand as to this is as far as we're going to go, and after this we need to change something, be it the way the financial system works or whatever, whatever it is that everyone has a passion, a passion about their cause, and for me, definitely social justice is, something that's important to me.
That's your jam. So CJSW, tell us about your life as a radio personality.
Yeah, CJSW has always been a part of my life. I remember we're 2015, 97. I walked up the steps into these dank, dark little offices of CJSW. In the basement in a building at U of C. Of course, it's now grown into a multi-million-dollar, sunny, clean, beautiful space on the third floor. But still, it still has that college radio vibe. But CJSW, especially in Calgary, it's so important because a lot of times if you turn on, people still listen to the radio. I still listen to the radio. Talking about CBC. If you listen to mainstream radio, if you listen to commercial radio, in my opinion, it's a wasteland, and it really gives a depressing view of arts and culture and music at large. And so to me, CJSW can act as that sort of bastion, that sort of collecting area for new music, for music that's challenging, for diverse music from all sorts of genres. And you don't really get that anyplace else. As well as CJSW is very active in alternative news, so covering stories that you wouldn't necessarily see written about in more mainstream news outlets. So CJSW has always been an important part of my life, and hosting a jazz show, which I have for a number of years, even though I don't necessarily play jazz, that genre has acted as a very heavy influence on me, especially the vocalists. And there's just something about the genre that I've always loved. And jazz in the mornings, you can't go wrong.
Exactly. So that's CJSW 90.9 FM and online CJSW.com. When can they hear your show?
Wednesday mornings, 7 to 10 a.m. I host a show called Morning After. It's with my actual brother Joe and my fake brother Chris, and the three of us get together every Wednesday morning and talk shit. We talk, some politics. Joe has a fascination for Mitt Romney, so he sometimes is brought up, but generally we just have fun and play. We play lots of jazz. We play some funk, some soul, definitely some R&B and blues, and I guess what you could say is it's definitely the urban art, all the urban art forms and all the urban music for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I noticed you mentioned that Steve Fletcher is in your band, so YYC Power Couples. Comments?
Yeah, it's handy. I will say it's definitely handy having someone like Steve in the same house because he's a gearhead. And so this is pretty much my instrument behind me here, the piano. It's not very portable, but I'm pretty a one instrument kind of gal. Steve, on the other hand, there are rooms that are just filled with keyboards and synths and drum machines, and so he makes a living as a musician full time as well. And because we play different genres, we never actually have to compete for gigs, which is good because I would murder him. I wouldn't, obviously, but yeah, there's something to be said for being in a relationship, and I'm sure everyone must hear this from all sorts of musicians who are in a couple with other musicians. How it's equally amazing and equally difficult. I guess every relationship can be considered that, but I think when you're in a relationship with another artist, the passions and the swings of inspiration and mood, and it can be very chaotic in this house sometimes, but I think one of the main things definitely is we can feed off of each other. We have a friend who lives in our basement below, Luis, who you've spoken with before, and he's an amazing percussionist here in Calgary, Luis Tavor. So if he's practicing, I'm practicing, and Steve's practicing, we're all kind of trading off inspiration, because if one person's practicing, you're obviously slacking if you're not. So having that kind of, that like, oh, you're practicing, well, I better sit down at the piano and start practicing. So we definitely feed off of each other, and it's handy when we have rehearsals, because Steve plays in my band. We just set it up and we go.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
So Kenna B 101, if I was going to listen to just one song or one album to just get to know you, if I haven't heard you before, what would you recommend?
Well, go to my Bandcamp page. It's pretty easy. I think it's bandcamp.com/Kenna Burima. You just type it into the search engine on Bandcamp. And I have my whole album there for download and to listen, so you could go there. That would be my first suggestion. I have one album, self-titled, released it back in April of 2014, and I'm working on a new one, so expect something probably midsummer for the new album. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, and we'll be looking forward to your performance this Friday.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.